What's going on, everybody? Well, me and Max are back here for another video today, and today is going to be a little bit of a different video, so hopefully you're okay with that. I know that we make fish keeping videos, but today is actually going to be a little different. So today what we're going to be doing is
we're going to be collecting some moss.
So that's right, we're going to be collecting some moss, and the purpose of collecting this moss is actually because we have a couple of builds coming up that are going to require some moss, and we figured why not get out into nature and collect it for these builds. So where we're at is this drainage creek area that comes out of a couple of neighborhoods, and the water is constantly running. It goes down under this bridge, down a slope into the lake. It's all freshwater drainage right here, so it is clean water, and we see a bunch of moss around, but there's one other place that we may try as well today depending on what we get here. But if you notice, right there on that rock, there's a little bit of sheet moss that's growing, and then back around everywhere, there's kind of sheet moss growing everywhere on these rocks. And what we want to do is we want to collect some of this, take it home, and build some sort of a propagation system so we can start to grow this stuff out and use this for our builds. So that's what really today's focus is going to be, is just picking out this moss and building this propagation system. So what we brought for supplies really is just a regular like plastic bin with some wet paper towel in the bottom, and that is just so the moss does not dry out while we're driving home. We're just going to take our finger and start pulling this off and try to keep it into a single sheet so we pull it away from this rock, just like that. So we'll place that into the bucket here, and then we'll leave the rest of this to repropagate right there, which that will completely grow back in, and it'll be back in no time. So we're gonna keep looking, and sheet moss may be the only thing that we find today, just simply because of the time of year it is here in Texas. But we'll start with this. So if you notice here, there's moss all on the side of this embankment right here, but it's all completely dry. And honestly, I don't know enough about moss on whether that would actually come back or not. I think once it's dried out like that, it's gone. And then when it starts getting wet again during the springtime, the spores from this moss will actually propagate it again. But I don't know. If you guys know more about moss or what kind of moss this is, let me know. And if it is something that will come back, I will definitely come back and grab some, and we'll try to propagate it as well. If you notice, there's tons of moss right here as well, but once again, this has all been dried out, and actually it's pretty wet. Well, it's somewhat damp. Let's take it and see if we can propagate that. I don't know. It may still be alive enough. So what I'm going to do here is just kind of push this stuff back together, and that stuff will grow back in. All right, so that may actually come back. We're not really sure, but we'll see. I just saw some fish in this little pool area right here, and back up in there in that shade is gonna be the best place. I'm just trying to figure out how to get there without getting wet. We may have to come from the other side. Well, we couldn't make it down around that area right this second, but we'll get over there in a minute. But right now, we're back around on the other side looking to see if we can find any other moss that may be living. Right now, it's very dry in Texas, so it's very much not season to be looking for moss, but we really need it, so hopefully some of this stuff will grow. All right, so we're now making our way back over towards where this water comes out of the freshwater drainage system. And I will tell you, I'm noticing all these ferns on the ground. I don't know what these are, but they're super cool looking. And honestly, they're only very close to the water. So I'm assuming that they like the very, very damp area, which means that they'd probably do really well in a terrarium. We may dig a couple of these up and take these with us and just see if it'll work in a terrarium. Also, if you look right there, it's just full of fish, which is super cool. But we're down here where the water's flowing nice in hopes that we can find some different kinds of moss that is actually alive. Like this right here as an example is a different type of moss that we have not collected yet. I believe that to be like a pillow moss or cushion moss, or maybe a, I think it's called star moss, but we're gonna take that little piece too. So this area, it's a storm drainage system, which means that it's taking the fresh rainwater and draining it into the lake. So it is a part of our local watershed, meaning that it is clean water that is going back into the lake. Now, what I'd like to know is, what do you guys think about these kind of exploration videos? I mean, of course, we're making videos for you guys, and we want you to enjoy what we're making, but I wanna know, let me know in the comments, what do you think about the exploration and just, you know, putting out videos when we go and collect our own materials, because we do actually do this often. So I think it's actually kind of cool to come and see new places and find new things, but I want to know what you guys think. So let me know in the comments. Look, there's more fish over here. But if you notice, there's all kinds of moss up on these rocks here. and we're gonna see if there's anything cool that we can collect over here. So what we have down here is a bunch of growth from the water just being right here. And I think we want to figure out what this stuff is because I'd really like to take some of it. So it's a really cool rock with some good moss on it. Maybe this rock right here. It's a much smaller rock. We'll probably take that one. Maybe this one here. Like I said, I'm not sure what this stuff is, but it's super cool. And it looks like it's growing in this really wet area. So I don't know exactly what this fern is, but if you happen to know, let me know in the comments. But I think I'm gonna take a small little piece of it just because it is so plentiful right here. And it looks like it's very much close to trying to get to the water. So I wanna see if we can get this to propagate in some way. Got a little frog. Don't know what kind he is, but super cute. So we got this little guy right here, and we got this little guy up here perched on a rock. Oh, he just jumped off. He's like, peace out, deuces my gooses. There he is right there. We're also going to take some of this. I don't know what kind of plant this is either. I'm going to look this up, but this is also growing in the water, and well, just kind of cool looking. So we're gonna grab some of this too. The trek by this little creek at our house is done. We picked up a couple of cool little samples of plants and moss, and we're gonna get that home and set up our moss propagation system. So before we do though, we got one more stop we need to make. So now that we have all of our stuff here that we could get around here, we have a couple more things that we have to pick up. And because we're doing a bioactive setup with this moss propagation system, we need to go pick up two things: springtails and isopods. And I don't know of a better place to pick those up around here other than Pyrotoad's house. So we will pick you back up when we get to Pyrotoad's.
I am currently getting Christopher Scott some isopods. If y'all don't know what isopods are, we'll show you in just a second. So take a look in here. So I put snake shed because they'll eat the snake shed, but if we flip it over, these little guys are something else. You can see all the little springtails. I don't know if your camera picks it up, but all those little guys are little tiny forest springtails, which are great cleanup crew, and they're great for breaking down mold, mildew, and really any sort of waste like that. More snake shed. So there's all of our little orange scabers. There's some there. There's probably some there. Yep, there's some there. These are also porcelios, so they're related to the powdered blues. There's a whole bunch right there. We'll do that little guy right there. Well, I'll give you the special white one here. These guys have like a specific genetic trait that makes them white. So you can see the white one there versus an orange one. Will we get on the corner? Oh no, he fell. The orange ones are a little bit different color. So they're the same exact isopod, just different in color. That's the only difference.
All right, well, little Max and I got back with all of our materials for this moss propagation system, right, dude? So what we need you to do is go ahead and comment below and let us know in the comments, what do you think about these exploration videos where we go out and we look at different places and things like that? We love getting out in nature. Of course, we love keeping fish in the house, but we also like to get outside and look at things and do things like that. So would you guys like to see when we go out and collect materials for our builds, or was this video just way too boring for you? Anyway, just let us know in the comments. We have a little bit of water in the bottom of this tub here, and I'm just going to sit these plants down inside of here just to keep them nice and moist until we are ready to get them into something more semi-permanent. So we now have this in here. We're going to go ahead and let this sit right here while we put together our new moss propagation system. So what we're going to be using for materials is a clear plastic tub with a clear lid because you want light to be able to penetrate this. We are also going to be using what I call a terrarium mix or a jungle mix, and this is a mixture of potting soil, cocoa fiber, some sand, and some reptibark, which just really holds moisture, as well as some sphagnum moss. Then we're going to be using a drainage layer, which is just some extra rock that I have left over. You can use pretty much anything, and that's what I use this stuff for, because that is actually drainage rock. Because we're going to be doing a bioactive setup, we're going to be using isopods and springtails in our setup, whereas if you do not have access to isopods or springtails, then you'll want to use some activated carbon or some charcoal, and we'll talk about that and where you would use that in this setup here in just a minute. And then we have one more piece that we need, which is some black weed barrier, and that'll be cut down to fit in the bottom of this tub, and we'll get into that here in just a moment. So with all of the supplies, it's time to go ahead and start building this thing. So let's get this thing together. So to start, we're going to lay a very light layer of drainage layer material or base layer to the bottom of this tub, and it's going to be about a ½ inch of this drainage rock. So now that we have our drainage layer here, we're gonna come back with a piece of felt and we wanna trim this down to fit down inside of this bucket, just right over top of the drainage layer. So I'm just gonna cut around the edge of this here. It doesn't have to be perfect in any way. You want it just large enough where it kind of comes up on the sides just a little bit. Now, if you were not doing a bioactive setup and you don't have access to isopods and springtails and things of that nature, this is where you could lay a nice thick layer of either some charcoal or some activated carbon. And what that would do is keep the water nice and clean. That would also, it provides your chemical filtration, meaning that it's going to help you reduce mildew and mold growth and things like that. But that's what these springtails will do, is they're actually going to take care of all that mold and mildew. And then the isopods will take care of any decaying matter such as leaf litter or anything like that, keeping this setup nice and clean. So our next step here is pretty simple. It's just going to be taking some of this mixture here. So this is a mixture of potting soil, cocoa fiber, reptibark, and a little bit of sand. And there is a little bit of sphagnum moss in here, not a whole lot. But what we're gonna do with this is just put this right here in the bottom and start pushing this up to the sides to get this felt to lay down. Okay, so now that we have this nice and filled with dirt, next step is we wanna come back and spray this down. Use my sprayer here to wash my hands off. Get all this dirt off. So we're gonna spray this down really good, saturate the ground a good bit. So the water I'm using here is actually water out of one of my tanks because it has nutrients in it, as well as it is already dechlorinated and doesn't have a bunch of junk in it. So once we get this nice and I say saturated, but you just want it nice and wet. We're gonna come in here and start placing this moss. I'm gonna go ahead and sit this vine in here. So what I figured out is I believe this to be a mimosa vine, and what's crazy about it is I think it's pretty hard to keep, but we're gonna try it anyway. But when you disturb this, these leaves close up, and as you can see, they've closed up a little bit. This one right here is not closed up, but they close up to protect itself. It'll bloom a nice, pretty, like purple colored flower, but we're gonna see if we can get this stuff to propagate, because it would be super cool in a terrarium. So I'm gonna place this stuff in here and just kind of bury it in the substrate a little bit and see if we can get this thing to actually take hold and come back, you know, and actually grow and propagate. Don't know, may happen, may not, we'll see. I'm not a green thumb by any means or any stretch of the imagination. I don't keep plants at all other than aquarium plants, and I'm okay with that, but so we'll see how this does. May work, may not. This stuff here that I picked up as well, I believe this to be something similar to a creeping Jenny, and it's a vine type setup on this plant. But we're gonna go ahead and bury this here too and see if this stuff will take hold in this nice moist environment, because it was very much in the saturated soil down between rocks and things of that nature, and right up next to the water. So I'm hoping that maybe this stuff will take hold and will grow and propagate as well, because this stuff is really cool. I mean, it's a very cool looking plant, as you can tell. It'd be super cool inside of a terrarium. So we'll see about this stuff too. I'm gonna put some of this like in different places in this tub here. But we'll check on this stuff later, because from what I'm reading about it is it should stand up and start to take a hold. So we'll see. May work, may not. This is my new endeavor into terrestrial plants, because I really like the idea of a really cool terrarium, as well as vivariums and ripariums and everything else. I've been watching a lot of Tanner and Serpa design, and you know, it's just such a cool hobby and I really like it. So I guess I'd ask you guys, what do you think? I mean, would you watch videos like that on my channel if I was to make terrarium style builds and things? I know I already kind of do some of that, but this stuff was not very hard to pull out of the ground. It was very lightly buried. It being a creeping plant like that, it takes very light roots into the soil. So we'll see how this stuff actually holds up and see if it will actually propagate. Now that we have a couple of rocks here this is some sort of a moss on here. Don't know what really it is. If you guys happen to know what this is, looks like hair moss of some sort or something like that, but it's just right on top of this rock. It also could be algae, not really sure, but it looks cool and it's gonna go in here. We have a couple of these rocks. They have different types of moss on them, but we picked up a couple of different ones. We'll place these in here. Another type of moss, not sure what that one is, but it's super cool looking. And what I did is before placing this in here, I actually washed this really well in some dechlorinated water to get any of the debris and any pests or anything like that that may have came with it out of it. This looks like sheet moss. This is a really cool moss. I'm not really sure. It's not sure on this one right here, but this one's really cool too. It kind of looks like sphagnum moss a little bit. I don't think it is, but we're gonna put that in here and see if we can get that to propagate. We got a whole bunch of that. Some more sheet moss. Another piece, I think this may be pillow moss or cushion moss. If you guys happen to know, definitely let me know in the comments. Maybe some more pillow moss. This is some moss I collected last year that had dried up, honestly, and these little red things here were green at one point and they had spores on it, but this moss has actually come back to life, it looks like, and is growing. So we're gonna put this in here, hopefully get some growth on that. Some more of that pillow moss there, which is also from another collection activity, and it looks like it's growing back too. And some more. So depending on how long you've been with the channel, this is some of the moss that I actually propagated in my waterfall tank, and that tank is right here that you can see on the screen. But I went and picked moss out of my yard during the early winter or early springtime and actually used it in this tank, and this is some that's propagated from that. So we're gonna put this little bit here into this tub as well, because this is well established and we want to make sure that this grows as well. But super cool and super easy thing to do. This was actually right in the flow of water in that waterfall, and this stuff is spreading like crazy inside of that tank. So we're gonna go ahead and add some of this in here too. Like I said, this is very well established moss, so I'm hoping that this takes root and just covers some of this area up, because I really like this. And I think it's like either pillow or cushion moss, not really sure which one, but super green, super pretty. So with that, I'm gonna come back in, kind of spray the top of this a little bit, just get it nice and wet. What'll happen is this water will seep through the bottom into the drainage layer, allowing for the condensation to build up on the walls and will provide plenty of moisture for this to grow. Now this container will actually be a two-fold grow out container, one for the moss and the second for these isopods and springtails. Like I said, springtails are going to be your cleanup crew that are gonna clean all of the mold and mildew and things of that nature out. So we're gonna go ahead and place these in here. And our next container is gonna be full of isopods. And isopods will take care of all of our dead material or decaying material, if any happens to exist in here. They'll start burrowing themselves down into this substrate. So as you can see, we have all the isopods, and if you look really close, right in this substrate here, let's see. So these little tiny white bugs, they're just like little bitty bugs. There's one right there. So those are the springtails. So like I said, those things will continue to clean up any type of bacteria or mold and things of that nature that would grow normally in a very wet environment, and will take care of all that stuff for us. So as a part of this, because there's not a lot of decaying material or anything like that, we're gonna go ahead and put some food in here for these guys to get them kind of jump started. If you notice here, they're all kind of in there, just eating away at stuff. And yeah, so they're really good for this environment. And like I said, complete bioactive setup now. So we'll check back on this in a little while and see how this thing looks. I forgot, I also picked up some sheet moss. Set this one right here on top. Got a couple extra pieces in here that I'm gonna stick down in here as well. So this stuff is great as well. Now that I have everything in here, what I want to do is just go ahead and spray it down and completely just get it nice and wet. And we are now complete with this. So I'm gonna go ahead and top this off, and what we will do with this is just simply place it next to the apistogramma tank. And now it gets plenty of light. We have easy access, we can see it, everything looks good in here. So we're gonna go ahead and leave this thing capped, and we'll check back on this in a few days and just see if there's any growth.
Several days later.
All right, well, it actually has been only about 3 days ago we set this up. But we wanted to go ahead and come in here and take a look and just see what it looks like. Now I've already looked, you can see the condensation has gone off the roof a little bit, but I did already look, so I know that this looks good. So let's just take the lid off here. And what we're gonna see is a couple things. Our pennywort is doing fantastic. If you notice, it is all standing up, looking great. This fern over here, I showed you earlier, this is called a mimosa fern, and in fact, this is called many different things. But one of the weird things about this fern is if you mess with it, it will actually start to close its leaves up in a defense kind of stance, trying to protect itself. And that's what had happened to it when I first showed you this before I put it in here, is that it actually began to close up trying to defend itself. So we have all of our pennywort that's back here that's doing really well. We have some new growth on some of these older pieces. You can see the green coming through there. Over here we have some more growth. This is some moss that propagated in another tank. These are growing nicely. More growth back here. This is, I'm not really sure what kind of moss this is. It looks really cool though. And this stuff is starting to stand up and kind of take a hold. Same thing back over here. So everything is looking good, and look right there, we have some new growth coming off of this pennywort. So what I want to do is I want to pull this moss right here. I want to lift this up. Oh, and look, there's some of our isopods. There's one of the black and white ones. There's one of the orange ones right there. So these things are doing really well, and everything in this thing looks fantastic. This is exactly what I wanted to see after a few days. So everything is looking good. Now, the question becomes, you know, what is it that I'm gonna do with this stuff, right? Now that we're growing this moss and everything is looking really good, what are we gonna do with it? Well, I have a couple of things, and I wanted to talk to you about that because this is not a fish keeping video, but this is in preparation for some of the setups we're about to do. Number one is we have Gerald's enclosure up here. And if you don't know, Gerald is a corn snake. When we first got Gerald a few months ago, he was tiny and little, and we knew that this 20-gallon long was not gonna last him very long. So we have a 40-gallon breeder that is ready to be built out for him. Some of this moss and vine and things like that may go into that. We're not really sure yet. But another project that we have is we're gonna be building a glass terrarium. This is gonna be a completely enclosed terrarium. So hopefully you guys like terrarium builds. So the next couple of videos will be Gerald's enclosure, a terrarium build, and then we're gonna get back into fish keeping by scaping out this 40-gallon water box aquarium into a nice, really planted, fully scaped setup. So look forward to that. I am on a more consistent schedule and will be posting every Monday and Friday for the foreseeable future. I'm gonna try to add more videos to that as we get through this. So you're watching this video today on Monday. The terrarium build video will be coming out this upcoming Friday, followed by Gerald's enclosure build next Monday. So make sure you have subscribed and make sure you turned on your notification bell. And also, if you haven't seen yet, Little Max Robert wanted to come back with these theme style tank setups. So we went ahead and did a Roblox themed tank, which turned out really cool. So if you haven't watched that, make sure you go watch it. Here's our little betta that's in there. It's a little blue mustard betta. Super, super cool. All right, guys, well, we hope you went on to enjoy this video. We hope you've learned something. Make sure that you comment below and let us know, what do you think about these exploration and these material gathering videos? If it's something you guys want to see, we'll make sure we start filming that and putting that out in separate videos. So with all that, I think Little Max has something to say here.
If you haven't followed us on Instagram or followed us on Facebook, do that now. And you should subscribe to our channel on YouTube.
For sure. So make sure you go follow us and subscribe. All the links for our social medias, including Little Max Robert's Instagram, are down below in the description of every video. If you have any video ideas or you have any feedback, there is an email address in the description as well as a phone number where you can text and call. Sometimes I answer, sometimes I don't. Sometimes Little Max Robert answers. So if you'd like to get a hold of us, plenty of ways to do that. But with all that, guys, thank you so very much for the support, and hey, we will see you next time.